Sometimes you should get upset when some little thing happens to you, because it's an indication that the whole damn environment has got dangerous on you. And sometimes you should just brush it off because, you know, its net consequence is low. But how do you calculate that? Very, very difficult question. So, you know, when your computer goes wrong, well, you have to pick the proper level of analysis to fix it. And you could say, well, there's something wrong with the circuit board, and maybe, you know, there's a crack in one of the somewhere that it's soldered, and or, you know, sometimes now when people are building microchips, they've run into a crazy problem. You know, microchips keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller, right? And so the little wires now are down to atomic width, or, you know, the width of maybe 20 atoms or something like that, but really, they're really getting thin. And so that produces another problem which no one would have ever, you wouldn't expect, and that is, you know, that at the quantum level there's uncertainty about where electrons might be. Normally that doesn't matter. The degree of uncertainty about where your electrons are is small enough at your size so that it's basically irrelevant. But down at the subatomic level, where these microchips are starting to be produced, sometimes the electrons will be outside the wires, and that means that they're getting so damn small that they'll short circuit by themselves because the electrons aren't stable enough to be where they're supposed to be in the wires. And so, well, the reason I'm pointing that out is because a problem that exists in a system can exist at any of the multiple levels of that system, and it isn't obvious where to start. And a lot of political arguments are like that, you know. It's like, well, maybe a company goes bankrupt and its shareholders get, or maybe a bank fails and so people can't withdraw their money, and one response is, well, that just shows you how rotten the capitalist system is. It's like, well, maybe that is what it shows, but it seems like that might not be the most appropriate level to start. And so again, it's like Occam's razor in the scientific world, right? You want to use the simplest explanation that it's not that fits the facts, because you don't organize your perceptions by facts. It's kind of like you want to use the simplest tool you can possibly manage to fix the problem. So you don't, when your car has a flat tire, you don't buy a new car. You fix the flat tire if you can figure out how to do it. And so you go for the thing that will put the tool back together with the minimum involvement of time and effort. It's something like that. And you care about that because you have limited time and you have limited resources. And so it makes sense for you to conserve them. And I'm telling you that partly for practical reasons too, because this is a very useful thing to know. If you're arguing with someone, you want to argue about the smallest possible thing that you could argue about that might fix the problem. You want to really specify it. It's like, what's going on at a micro level, and what's the minimum that I would require to be satisfied with the outcome. And if this is especially true in intimate relationships, is like, if someone's bugging you and you want them to change, you think, well, how can I be minimally bothered by this, and what's the tiniest amount of change I could request that might satisfy me? Because otherwise the argument will come unglued, and every time you guys try to discuss a problem, you'll start talking about whether you should even be together, and then you're done because you'll never solve a problem, and then you won't be together because you'll never solve a problem. So, okay, so here's a way to think about perception. So let's say that this is the thing you're trying to look at. I called that the thing in itself. Now that's a schematic of a thing in itself. So the thing in itself, that's an old philosophical concept, and I think it came from Kant, but I'm not sure about that. It might be older than that. And the thing in itself is what you could see if you could see everything about something, but you can't. So it's a hypothetical entity. And maybe, who knows, if I was looking at you like the thing in itself, maybe I could see every level of your being from the subatomic up to this level of perception, and then beyond. I could see your family relationships. I could see how they were nested in your societal relationships, economic relationships, political relationships, the ecosystem as a whole. Like, I would see all these levels at the same time. Of course, I don't, because I can't. What I see instead is, first of all, you're radically simplified by my senses, because they're just not acute enough to say see you at a microscopic level, and they're not comprehensive enough to see your connections across time. So my senses filter a bunch of you from me right away, and then I'm also filtered from you by your willingness to act like I want while we're together, because you could be doing all sorts of strange things at the moment, but you're not. And so you're helping me simplify my perceptions of you by agreeing to play the same game that I'm playing while we occupy